Welcome to Friday Friends, RI Elder Info's weekly look at the organizations and individuals providing resources for Rhode Island seniors, caregivers, and professionals.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. It is 9 a.m. on Friday, and you are watching me, Deb Burton, Executive Director of RI Elder Info and host of Friday Friends, where I bring you information and resources that you or someone you know needs to know about. So we have a very important topic that we're going to be discussing today. So please hit the share, the like, the bells, the whistles, all those social media cues that say, hey, check this out, because this is a really important topic. It is a very timely topic, and I am speaking with one of the experts in the state on the topic of homeless older adults. So please help spread the word and hit all those social media cues that say, hey, check this out. Now, as you know, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and I could not do this without the support of our sponsors. So big thank you to Point 32 Health Foundation, United Healthcare, Oak Street Health, 321 Media, and of course, our friends over at McCarthy Law.
Here at McCarthy Law, we practice in the areas of estate planning, long-term care planning, elder care law, and residential real estate. Our focus is really on providing peace of mind to our clients.
If you're interested in scheduling a consultation with our office, you can feel free to reach out to us at 401-541-5540. You can also reach out via website at www.mccarthylawri.com. You also should check out our social media, both on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn for some helpful tips and tricks.
Welcome, Brenda Clement from HousingWorksRI. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, absolutely. So for folks who don't know you or don't know HousingWorksRI, can you share with people what it is that you do?
Sure, happy to do so. Housing Works Rhode Island is located at Roger Williams University at the Providence campus. We're one of the community partners here at the Providence campus. And we're a research and policy organization that looks at all things housing and trying to show through our data and our reports, our annual housing fact book, and more recently our zoning atlas and other tools, trying to present the data and information about housing and its connectedness to economic growth and development in the state, but also improving health outcomes and educational outcomes. So hopefully people have seen or heard our fact book or our zoning atlas. And as again, we try to use this data and information to help inform our public policy and debate on these important topics.
And are you finding housing challenges are getting worse, staying the same? I know we've been behind in producing housing.
Mm-hmm.
How is it going?
Way behind. This is our 20th anniversary for Housing Works, and we were formed kind of around the first housing bond campaign. Voters just approved housing bond number 5 this past November. Thank you, voters, for voting yes on 3 on that front as well, to provide some more resources for housing and housing production. We have been underbuilding housing since the mid-1980s. At the peak time, we were pulling about 7,500 building permits per year. For the last almost 20 years now, we've been pulling just a little bit over 1,000. So we have not been, so it's a huge, big drop. And we just have not been keeping pace with, not because Rhode Island has had such a big population growth, although we've had some over that time period of time, but we've also had changes in household size and household formation and a trend to much smaller households. COVID and the advent of remote working also has had a big impact on our our real estate market as well too, as we become a much more affordable option for people in nearby Massachusetts and Connecticut and New York. So all of these things kind of come together to make affordability. And our fact book this year, for again the second time in a row, there is not one single community in Rhode Island where you can afford to buy and not be considered cost burden unless you're earning over $100,000 a year.
And we talk a lot about cost burden, but what does that actually mean?
Right. So the federal government defines cost burden as if you're spending more than a third of your income, of your gross income, and that's your income before taxes, as we know. If you're spending more than a third of your income on your housing costs, you're considered cost burden. Consistently and persistently, as I say in Rhode Island for the last 20 years that we've been tracking it, 1 out of 3 Rhode Islanders are cost burden. And so at the higher end income level, that may mean you don't put as much into savings, or you don't buy a new car, or maybe you don't go on vacation in a particular year. But we know as we go further down the income scale that those choices become much dire. And for seniors, a lot of times it's between rent and food, and rent and utilities, or rent and medication. And we know that many workers who are providing critical supports to individuals and older adults as they age in place are also facing those same challenges. Our colleagues at the food bank just released their annual hunger report, and their executive director says all the time that rent eats first. People try desperately to keep the roof over their head and their family's head, and have to make sacrifices in other parts of their budget. So when your housing costs are so out of whack, as we're seeing now, the pressure on those family budgets becomes even more dire.
So I just did like a little side calculation over here to try to figure out, like, if somebody made $100,000 a year, if I divide that by 12 and then divide that by 3 for 30%, that means their mortgage would be in the neighborhood of $2,777.78. So about $2,800 a month. That's for somebody who's making $100,000. Our CNAs are making like 40 something thousand a year.
At best, right? And in fact, in our fact book this year is that over 90% of the fastest growing jobs in the state do not pay anywhere near a housing wage. And many of those are in home health aid and healthcare jobs and retail jobs and other jobs, and providing critical services for seniors and elders who want to age in place or age in their community. And those workers have been, unfortunately, locked out of the housing market for a long period of time.
Yeah, and we have a slide. I'm going to try to bring up the slide deck here because I found it so interesting. So this is your slide deck, meeting the housing needs of Rhode Island older adults.
Thanks to our funders as well.
Absolutely, we love this is
some ongoing work. And Blue Cross just released their Rhode Island Life Index today, and housing remains a top challenge or a top concern for the average Rhode Islander based on their survey calls as well. No surprise to us, but still bad.
Excellent. I unfortunately couldn't make it to that, but it's stunning. So I found this really interesting. Of the population of over 1 million, 48% are age 50 or older. Yay. Go me. And the head of household numbers, it seems like, are changing in the demographics of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, the numbers are as you can see there, but there is shifting happening in our population. Now that our population is certainly aging, and household formation and household heads of households are also shifting as well too. Unfortunately, at the same time, not only are housing costs going up, but also the age and condition of housing is also growing old in our state. And so there's oftentimes a very big mismatch between the types of housing needed for people to age in place and age in community than what we actually have available, even setting aside the cost of it as well too. And some of our colleagues in the the advocacy community around trying to make things accessible, remind us that, well over half of Rhode Islanders already currently use a mobility device. I don't have that statistic right in my head, but it's even higher than that. And that number is going to continue to grow as we all age. So there's a big mismatch on many, many levels in the housing world for the changing needs and the changing demographics of the households.
And looking at this, the income differences are really stunning, because for older adults, the probability of them going out to get a job to have a greater income is much lower than, say, a younger individual. So this was pretty shocking to me.
Yeah, and it's also no surprise just because of the demographics. These are also often older women, and who, were, because of family obligations and because of traditional roles that women of that generation had, of opportunities they didn't have available to them that people like me and a little bit younger did, weren't high income levels, right? So there's all of their benefits, any pensions, everything else were all at a much reduced rate. So even women homeowners are often house rich but cash poor, and then trying to maintain that house over the long term, unlimited income is often a big challenge.
Absolutely. And so this is by whether or not they have a mortgage, and it was a little scary to see the cost burden in relation to the mortgage and the age demographics. It seems we're carrying our mortgages later into life.
We are, and a lot of that we find, and so it's hard. The data is not great on this, but we're trying to find out why people refinanced and remortgaged. But it's often to help a next gen get into the housing market as well too, but also financing healthcare costs and just daily living that they may need. But it's a dangerous trend for seniors, but unfortunately we see it a lot. And even people who have already paid off their mortgage. I mean, as we all know, your mortgage payment has 4 primary components: principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And even if you pay off that principal and interest to the bank or the mortgage company, you still owe your local property taxes and your insurance. And insurance in general is becoming a big problem throughout the state and the country. And the cost of it has grown dramatically, sometimes as high as 50, 60, 70% increases that we're seeing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's kind of an on next storm. I think that we're going to raise, and a lot of that, speaking of storms, is related to climate change and wind damage and age of our housing stock. It's old roofs and other things that insurance companies consider big risks. So there's a lot of stuff that we'll be kind of trying to get ahead of on that moving forward.
Yeah, fixed incomes don't necessarily have the ability to cover, a $10,000 or $15,000 new roof. And when you're looking at, 35% of people 65 to 79 still have a mortgage, that can be a lot. And for 80 plus. Whew.
Yeah, and and the big part of the problem, kind of back to our conversation on the production numbers, is that we don't have a lot of options for people to downsize to, even if they want to, which for many people they don't want to, and my own mother included in that conversation. But even if they want to, or even if they need to, there isn't a lot of options. We haven't been building a lot of senior housing in that same period of time. We haven't been building a lot of housing, and so there's not any good kind of downsizing options in their community. And many people aren't ready or don't want to go to a nursing home, can't afford an assisted living facility, but there's nothing kind of in between for that lower income, more moderate income category as well too. And that's as we work with the new Department of Housing and the legislature on the state housing plan, trying to put a focus on options for seniors and creating more opportunities for seniors is something that we hope this data and information will help to inform.
Yeah, I know AARP of Rhode Island did a lot of work around the accessory dwelling units and the ability to create those. So that's been really important work that they've been doing.
It's a great option because it provides some opportunity for intergenerational living and support for seniors who want, they can move to the smaller unit potentially, and family members or others can move into the larger unit, provides them some economic security and support, and, kind of creates kind of that village commons concept, that we know works well, and that people need that support in order to stay in their house. So it is still a concern in many communities, even though the legislation finally passed by right. There's still some hurdles you have to jump over in the local level, and so trying to create more of them is going to be interesting. But we think it's a good option. We think it adds, anything that adds to the supply is, in our opinion, a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because if we don't add to the supply, that brings us to the older adults who are experiencing homelessness, which this is something that I'm getting more and more and more calls. I mean, when COVID was, I don't want to say winding down because it's still out there, but when some of the pandemic relief efforts came to an end, I found a big spike in people saying, the hotel programs are closing. Yeah. Where can people go? I'm still getting those calls, but it seems like the calls are even more dire in that many of our shelters are full.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, we had that big rainstorm. And I know over in West Warwick, they opened up the Civic Center, the West Warwick Civic Center, because there's many unsheltered people who live by the river. And the expectation was that the river would rise with the rain. And so this is a thing.
It's a big thing. And, and again, we, as we rapidly approach winter and we still haven't been able to get the pallet shelters open that House of Hope has been working on for ages now, to try to provide some options other than congregate shelter for people as well too. And there's just a reluctance in many communities still to provide any kind of relief for either allowing a shelter and or building more affordable housing. So it's clear that the challenges are still there, and that we need to continue to push forward and really do kind of not only a fact-based campaign, but also a hearts and mind campaign. These are our parents, these are our grandparents, these are people who watched over us, and we have a duty to watch over them.
Absolutely. And in addition, maybe people didn't get along with their parents. The reality is this could be us as we get older.
Yep.
So your information includes the prevalence of older housing stock. Why does the age of the housing stock make a difference when we're looking at availability?
So on a bunch of fronts. One is that I already mentioned, is that a lot of our housing stock is some of the oldest housing stock in the country. In fact, our rental stock is tied for third with Massachusetts on all things housing. And that presents all kinds of unique challenges and problems for people because it was built before any handicapped accessibility or universal design. And so if you now are trying to age in place and use a walker, or need parking close to your entryway, if you're trying to make your bathroom safer, all of those things are challenges in these houses because they were built well before any thoughts of things like that. And the other challenge that we already mentioned is cost. How even if you're in your own home and can make, how do you pay for those modifications? How do you pay for a ramp? How do you pay for bathroom renovations? How do you pay for just the general upkeep? As these houses age, so too do their systems. So we already talked about roofs, but heating systems and other windows, all other expensive things that start to age on the house as well too, are also a challenge for older adults to maintain the house moving forward.
Absolutely. So here are some additional data. Is there a priority given in the shelter list if an individual has a mobility impairment, that they get bumped up when the next available apartment that is mobility impaired accessible? Is there a prioritization?
So there's not a good way to do that, but I agree with you that we should be doing that. We often see some mismatch between units that are accessible, but the next person on the list doesn't technically need an accessible unit. So there's no, I say it all the time, there's no easy front door. I mean, we've tried to make it easier to get, the coordinated entry system to find ways into shelter, but also to try to get better coordination around searching for units and placing people with units through the coordinated the consolidated wait list for public housing units and so forth. But that's still a small slice of the potential units. And there's also not, there's no easy way to navigate through the system with private landlords and private market units as well too. So that's something that I really hope we can start to focus on a little bit more at the Department of Housing, with the new Department of Housing, is how to increase accessibility and availability of these units for people who really need them.
Yep.
In the previous organization that I worked for in Massachusetts, CHAPA runs a group called Mass Access that does exactly that, tries to prioritize the accessible units to and link them up to people who need them the most.
Wow. And when it comes to finding accessible housing, I love the forethought that went into this slide here of where's the housing for the older adults, and where's the transportation. I think this slide is very important. I'm sorry for the folks in Foster.
Yeah, this is, this connectedness, and this is one of the bills that has not passed the legislature yet that we really hope gets some light of day this year around TOD, or transit-oriented development. We know, particularly as seniors age, my mother no longer drives. And so, trying to get people from point A to point B, she's lucky that she has wonderful children like me and my brother and sister. But, a lot of adults don't have that family support and don't have that family access to get them from point A to point B as well too, and rely on transit or public transit or other other rideshare programs as well too. And so this is an example from our zoning atlas. We're part of a national project called the National Zoning Atlas Project, where we're trying to take data and information to help inform growth and development in communities. I'm a native Rhode Islander, and I don't want to ruin Rhode Island, right? I want to build where it makes sense. I want to build where people have access to transit and jobs and healthcare and other services that they may need as well too. And so doing this in a smart way and doing this in a thoughtful way is what we, again, hope the zoning atlas does. 87% of our state is zoned single family. And so doing some of this more denser development around transit lines and transportation hubs is still a challenge at the local level. You're often crossing municipalities as well too. And the funding and money for housing, particularly affordable housing, comes in Rhode Island largely from the federal level, but some from the state level, thanks to voters who supported the bond again. But what you build, where you build, and how you build are all controlled at the local level. And there's 39 cities and towns in the state, all with their own little set of rules.
Yep. Okay. So we talked about the accessory dwelling units. This is a very pretty accessory dwelling unit.
It is lovely, isn't it? It does not look like a Rhode Island one. We have on our website some traditional ADU designs that we did with some students from Roger Williams Architectural School, and the AARP also worked with RISD architecture program to look at some sample designs. But we took sample similar Rhode Island housing types like a ranch or a cape or other things that you would see are garage conversions, and try to use those as examples for people. So, but this is lovely.
This is lovely, yes. But I think it may even be easier if you're converting, say, a garage or a basement or something like that, as long as you're meeting all the different pieces.
Yeah.
And when we talk about housing and healthcare and the intersectionality, I don't think people always realize Medicare, which we get based on our age or our permanent disability. Medicare does not cover long-term care in nursing homes, assisted living.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at that, like $120,000 for a nursing home.
Yeah.
And going up, because this is 2023 data, and I believe that there's been an increase in 2024. There's one coming in 2025. So whether or not you have a lot of money kind of depends on what you're buying. And
Yeah.
so, you know, you'll do better being able to stay in the community for much longer.
As long as possible. Yeah. Agreed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why things like ADUs and others, to help people and help generations of across the family be able to house together. And I mean, many of us and many of our older adults grew up in neighborhoods and communities in our urban core communities in tenement houses, where you had the aunt on the upstairs and the mom and dad or grandparent, and that intergenerational living is not a new concept, certainly. And in some ways, that's what ADUs try to replicate in a more suburban type model, and try to help, increase the opportunities as well. Because we know a lot of people and a lot of seniors in particular are overhoused right there in the old family homestead that's really now too big for them. But as I said, there's limited options as to where they can go if they do want to downsize. And so ADUs are a potential option, building more affordable rental units or senior housing. We just had a groundbreaking at Reynolds Farm in North Kingstown, which is a great example of the types of development that we're talking about, that would integrate into existing communities in very thoughtful ways.
Absolutely. And Reynolds Farm, if I recall correctly, around 2018-ish, gave a great demonstration of how smart home technology can help people age in place longer. So I'm really excited about that Reynolds Farm development. That is awesome.
Me too. And I think we just need to be looking at doing more of that throughout the state, and trying to recreate these these little village centers. And we used to get that connectedness in Rhode Island around housing, transportation, and jobs. And you only have to look at mill villages and mill centers where you had housing types and of all different shapes and sizes and income levels. And it was either a walkable neighborhood or on a end of a trolley line or a horse and buggy line, depending on the age of the mill. And then you have the job center. And so trying to recreate that again, or replicate that again, I think is a good direction for Rhode Island to go.
Absolutely. So I have kept you way longer than I promised. So
no worries. I can talk. I joke all the time that I'll talk about housing, whether I'm invited to or not. So thanks for inviting me.
You are always invited to join us, because this is something that is so critical, because there's so many different facets to it. If people have questions or want to reach out, what's the best way to reach you? Or should they reach their legislator?
Talk to your legislator. The other important thing that I wanted to mention, we talked a little bit about the workforce before, that a lot of the workers that are income burdened are people who are providing critical resources for seniors. But the other thing, as I mentioned, is that, zoning and land use and housing developments happen at the local level. So it encouraged people, if you have never been to a planning board or a zoning board meeting in your community, you should go, and you should, particularly when a housing project comes up, and say, I'm the type of person who needs this housing, or, my family member or my healthcare worker needs this housing, because that is critical. So talk to your state rep and senator for sure, but also talk to your local mayor or town administrator or people on your council, and make sure that they know that this is an issue that you're concerned about, because it is impacting us all already, and its impact will continue to grow.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of not in my backyard and preconceived notions on affordable housing and what that is, what that looks like.
Yep.
And, most Rhode Islanders are not making $100,000.
No, so, and when 1 out of 3 Rhode Islanders are cost burdened, it means that either you are the one who is cost burdened, or somebody within your family or somebody within your network, somebody who goes to church, somebody who bagged your groceries at the grocery store, somebody who took your blood pressure at the doctor's office is one of those people who are cost burdened. And so this is not their problem, it's an our problem, and we've got to figure it out together.
Oh, I love that. That is a great statement. Brenda, thank you so much for coming on today.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. I look forward to collaborating with you in the future.
Same here. Thanks again. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. I love how Brenda just said it's not their problem, it's an our problem, because this is something that is impacting all of us in one way or another. So go to your zoning boards, really think about what would it mean if you developed a disability and couldn't maintain your house. What does that look like? Most Rhode Islanders are not making, $100,000 plus to be able to afford market rate rent right now. And as the data showed, we have a lot of older adults who still have mortgages. So there's a lot to consider. And 1 in 3 is cost burden. So look to your left, look to your right. One of the 3 of you is cost burdened, realistically. And it's something that is impacting all of us. So reach out, make sure that you support the building and zoning when affordable housing is in your community, because every community needs it. So I am glad that you have all stayed with me today. We ran a little long. I appreciate it. I hope you hit the like, the share, all of those fabulous things. And if you like the show, please consider becoming a monthly member of RI Elder Info's family to keep us going. And I look forward to seeing you all again next week. In the meantime, be well and be kind.
If you like this video, please follow us on social media and subscribe on YouTube. For more information, visit rielderinfo.com or call 401-585-0509. If you have any questions, email deb@rielderinfo.com.